Welcome back to Hardball. President Obama's poll numbers are slipping nationwide, but today he visited two important states. He stopped by the Kennedy Space Center down in Florida, a place that's actually suffering job losses due to the shutdown of the shuttle program in that crucial battleground state of Florida. And earlier today, he toured the disaster zone in Alabama. Let's watch.
I want to just make a commitment to the communities here that we are going to do everything we can to help these communities rebuild. We go through hard times, but no matter how hard we may be tested, we maintain our faith and we look to each other to make sure that we're supporting each other and helping each other. I'm sure that spirit is going to continue until this city is all the way back.
So where do these trips get the president? Richard Wolff, I know his name, moved to prompter, is an MSNBC political analyst. And Joe Williams joins us. He's a new fellow on the block. He's Politico's White House correspondent. I'm going to let the new guy for us, Joe, the president. You know, we've been trying to figure this out, and I find it fascinating because sometimes you get tired of politicians. Jimmy Carter had that problem, I think, at some point, and people don't want to see him again for a while. This president, every time he gets out and does a lot of this whirly-bird running around the country, doing Oprah and all that stuff, he tends to go up in the numbers. He bounces up to about 50. When he fades and does his sort of relax, does some exercise, whatever, does his own thing, disappears from public view for a while, he drops. What's your sense as a reporter of covering him, why he has to go out there and do these I'm with you kind of appearances?
Well, the sense is, and this sort of reminds me of a moment that Lyndon Johnson had back in the 60s, where after Hurricane Betsy, he went down to New Orleans, touring the place. He walks into a darkened shelter, and he's got the flashlight. He says, I am your president. I am here to help you. And basically, that's the notion that these sort of trips get across, particularly when the president goes to the disaster zones. But still, he is quite popular with the people. I mean, you might check a couple other polls that suggest that his personal popularity is quite high. His political popularity is still a bit dicey. But in essence, what you get when the president travels on the road, you get Air Force One landing in a small city, getting a lot of press coverage. You get the presidential motorcade, and people can't help but get excited about that because even though he's a very familiar face, a presidential visit for most of the country is quite rare. We take it for granted here in Washington because this is what we do. But out on the road, he still generates a lot of excitement. People still want to see him because he is who he is and because he still carries that personal charisma that took him so far in 2008.
Well, that's an amazingly interesting, intricate look at it because there's three aspects to a president. He's president, and he's here. That's one story. The second is I sort of like the guy, I disagree with him. Right. And the other is I don't like what he's doing. Now, I don't like what he's doing is where he's doing a job approval or not like him. But this thing about him being more personally likable than his job performance would suggest it helps to get out there.
Personal numbers are still high for him, not the job approval numbers, but personal numbers. And by the way, you know, he is called Barack Hussein Obama, okay? This is still the guy who represents something different. And to the extent
What'd you call him?
Barack Hussein Obama. That's his middle name. Right. You know, you may, but it doesn't matter. The point is that the more
he said Barack Saint Obama. That's what I thought he
said. That's just something for our blog fans. When you look at how he has to campaign, it is as an outsider. So the more he looks like a familiar politician, just another guy in a suit, the worse it looks. Every time he's stuck behind a podium, this is the lesson, the hard lesson they learned in the first couple of years. The worse it is for him. The more he gets out, the more he's campaigning. I
wrote a book on this, Joe. And Richie and I have seen it, but I once wrote a whole chapter of a book, which actually sold a lot of copies back when. And you know what it was? I basically said, if you close your eyes and think of the president behind a desk somewhere, like Bob Dole next to us, he's going to lose.
Right.
If you think about him, think about him as a guy out there in the sun, with the sun in his face, walking around, looking like a cowboy, sleeves rolled up, he wins. Mondale, indoor. Dole, indoor. You know, you can also, Dukakis, indoor. These other guys, and maybe we'll talk about it, Joe, because exactly what we're talking about here. And that explains why here he is out in the sun, shirt sleeves, he's always been fit, looking like $1 million, looking like a guy.
He is somebody you can relate to. He becomes real. He's somebody on the ground who cares. At least that's the inference that they're trying to get across when they have these trips, especially to areas that have been hard hit by troubles. And again, I think it was mentioned earlier in the program, the first part of disaster recovery, if you're in the White House, is showing up, showing that you care. And being out there and delivering the common touch, talking with ordinary people, dehumanizes you, humanizes you, takes you away from the stodgy sort of Washington insidery mode that you would get stuck in inside D.C. and shows that you do care about the country no matter what your policies might be. And there aren't any. Exactly. Certainly, there aren't any Tea Partiers exactly in disaster sites as well. So that carries the whole anti-government argument pretty far.
You raised a point. I saw a poll today in my favorite conservative newspaper, the Washington Examiner, this morning, so I guess a shopper. You know, even in the Republican Party, which is the most conservative of the parties, obviously, the Tea Parties are only doing about 60%.
Right.
Outside, they are not popular.
Right.
It's stunning. You know, very unpopular among independents, among Democrats, overwhelmingly independent, even among Republicans, just 3 out of 5. That's not exactly, and they're benefiting from the Tea Party.
Let's just remember, what do people want at a time of disaster like this? They want government. They want federal government help. So
you're going to hurt them, he's cutting jobs in the space program down in Florida.
At a local level, yeah. But remember, as well, he's taken a hit here for doing the kind of budget cuts that Republicans want more of. That just shows that if they really push it hard, they're all going to suffer.
They're real.
They're real. People's jobs.
Talk.
That's not deficit cutting. Does not create jobs. It cuts jobs. That's the point.
Yeah, well, everybody wanted to cut everything until they realized they had to cut something. And then, we have to cut something, not just everything. Cutting everything's easy, Joe. Cutting something like Medicare, and these guys have their own Tea Parties coming at them. Take a look at the president's poll numbers. Not so great. Pollster.com is the average of the president's job approval around the country. His disapproval number is up to 50.6, just above middle. Disapproval down to 44. Can you read that in your mind, Joe, as you cover him? Can you sense when he's up and down covering him?
You can sort of sense inside Washington that that's sort of the sense that everybody's walking around with. But again, these are fairly early numbers relative to 2012, and it's also numbers compared to what? Compared to who might be the Republican nominee, who might even be more unpopular if you get a Tim Pawlenty, let's say, or Romney is doing well in New Hampshire, but that's his backyard. Let's see what happens on a national scale. You do have a guy who looks very good out on the stump. That's his sort of natural habitat, if you will. And his job performance, while most people would give it low marks, certainly people would find it hard to argue that he came in with a tough hand ahead of him. He came in with a lot of problems in the inbox.
Yeah, but one number's going up, though, Joe. One number's, in all fairness, one number's going up, and that's the gasoline number. I know the market's up, unemployment's down. There's some good things in terms of where he started, but the unemployment, the gas number is killing. I've watched 3 presidents now basically run from office. Jimmy Carter and Gerry Ford and Nixon that was the economics behind it. These gas lines and these high prices for the pump kill politicians.
It's absolutely ugly, and things, I think, the other crucial number you might hear is 8.9 unemployment rate. If it goes down, continues to go down, the White House feels like they're in good shape. If it stays high, it's signaling trouble, along with high gas prices. Inflation is starting to creep up. Things are costing more than they used to. So there's a very real clouds on the horizon here. The question is, what can be done to control that, and what is within the president's power to make it seem like action is being taken to address the very real problems that people are facing? So Richard, there is a very tough hand ongoing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Richard, when you talk to the pals around the president, as you're writing books and getting the deep stuff, how are they going to deal with the fact that we have $5.50 gas next year? Or do they know what that does? When you're not looking at the opponent, you're not saying how boring Pawlenty is or how dull Mitt Romney is. You're thinking, I got to do something about gas price. I got to vote no.
Yeah, no, they do think about it. The truth is there's not a lot they can do. They can talk about the long-term solutions, let's go to green energy and all that stuff, but they saw how it hurt Bush, too. Yeah. And the problem is that consumer confidence gets hit by that, even as it's kind of improving because unemployment is coming down. So it acts as a counterbalance to the better economic news. It makes it much, much harder. For the campaign they want to run is It's Morning in America. And what are you going to say? It's sort of Morning in America. Morning's on the way. It means that it's still out of reach. And every time they think they're getting some momentum on the economy, it slips away. That's what they're facing now. That's what they had a year ago with the Gulf oil spill.
Okay, story of the week, Joe. Why did they put the birth certificate out when that was decoying all the crazies out there, showing them to be crazy? Did they do it for the presidency, or they did it for the politics, or for the country? What do you think was the reason they flashed that paper finally this Wednesday?
I would suggest probably all 3. I mean, that's a very sort of interesting question as to timing. Certainly it helped deflate Donald Trump, because now there's a lot of open talk about buffoonery, about the fact that this was not a serious guy to begin with. Okay, let's all just take a deep breath and get back to work on the real problems. So I think that in that regard, it was a shrewd move to try to get some of that air out of that balloon and take away the altitude from Donald Trump.
Him? Excuse me, wasn't that good for the president to have a man acting so maniacal out there and so, I think, ethnically prejudicial, actually, in the way he behaved? Wasn't that helpful in terms of moving the center toward the president?
Well, it sort of poisoned the well, if you will, because not only was it speaking very, very loudly and very clearly to the fringe, it also was having sort of a deleterious impact on the middle of the road voters. It was infecting the larger well of votes that he will have to draw from. It was starting to show up in polls where people were starting to believe this. Certain polls showed that even 40%, upwards of 40% of people still have questions. That's a very real political problem that they had to tackle.
Joe Williams, where have you been, sir? We have not had you on till now, and I'm glad you're on. Please come back again. You are a great guest. Thank you so much. Richard, I don't have to salute you. You've been such a great guest for so long. You know, you're like the prodigal son's older brother. We take you for granted anyway.